So welcome to this webinar on Introduction to Adzuna Data and how to apply for access. I'll be taking the session. My name is Heather Sinclair, Information Services Officer at UBD, the Urban Big Data Centre. I'll be joined today by Scott Sweden from Adzuna, Chunshan Zhao, Senior Lecturer in Urban Analytics at UBDC, Andrew McHugh, Senior Data Scientist Manager, and Nadia Gorash, Data Scientist at UBDC. I'd like to remind participants that this session is being recorded and will be uploaded on the Urban Big Data Centre website in an accessible format at a later date for those who could not attend the session. Cameras will be turned off and microphones muted to aid privacy and also for bandwidth reasons. You may wish to adjust your name as it appears on the screen. Feel free to introduce yourself on the chat box, but please don't include any personal email information such as phone numbers or emails. Please also use the chat to ask questions. These will be collated and responses will be provided in the Q&A session at the end. During the webinar, there will be 3 presentations, followed by an opportunity for discussion and a question and answer session where you can submit your questions using the chat function. Now I'll move on to the first session, which provides an introduction to Adzuna data and how to apply for access. Okay. To start, I'll provide some background information about UBDC. The Urban Big Data Centre was established in 2014 and it is jointly funded by the ESRC and the University of Glasgow. The aim of UBDC is to promote innovative research methods and the use of big data to improve social, economic and environmental well-being in cities. UBDC's research centre specialises in the area of transport, mobility, housing and environment, education and skills, urban governance and urban analytics. As a data service, we achieve this by enabling and supporting the research of our service users. The objective of UBDC's data service is to build an outstanding data collection for non-commercial research by UK academics, which support high quality, impactful research on UK cities. So Adzuna data is one of our recent additions to the collection. Adzuna searches thousands of websites and brings together millions of job advertisements on their website. The Adzuna data provides information about the job market, job categories, and can be used to analyse vacancies over time. The data provides snapshots of job ads which were advertised on adzuna.co.uk at a particular point in time. UBDC will provide historical data from 2017, current data, and also future data up to spring 2022. So this is a table with the fields that are included in the Adzuna data. Includes everything you would expect to see if you were going to a website to view a job vacancy. So it has the ID of the job vacancy, the contracted hours, so you can tell if it was full or part-time, the type of contract, whether it was permanent or temporary, the company name, the date the job listing was added, a detailed description of the job. It has location information, so it includes latitude and longitude coordinates, the region it was in, so for example, Northwest England or Yorkshire and Humber, the minimum maximum salaries. There's also a field for predictive salaries, if that's for listings without salary information. The currency of the salary, we have UK data, so in most cases it will be pounds, the job title and the link to the advert. I don't expect you to remember all that from the previous slide. So UBDC has a data catalogue on their website with information about all the available data sets. This is a screenshot of the entry for Adzuna data, and by clicking on read more, you'll be taken to further information and also a data profile sheet, which contains all the information that was on the last slide. Yeah. So who can apply to use the data? So UBDC has a limited number of credits available to sub-licensed data to PhD level students or staff at UK universities. The data is to be used for non-commercial academic research. UBDC licenses are for academic research, but if anyone on the call is from a government organisation who would like to access the Adzuna data, then they could contact Adzuna directly to discuss their licensing options. Projects should generally be up to 2 years duration, although longer qualifying projects may be supported. Academic staff can use the data for research projects, but it's not to be used for teaching use. Applicants are expected to be ready to use the data straight away once they receive it. The data can be used for various purposes, so I've included a few here. Analysis of new vacancies, overall vacancy levels, vacancies by a particular region, or by a particular job type. So the first call for expressions of interest is now closed, but UBDC will soon be launching a second call. And so once it's launched, you'll find everything you need to know on the call for expressions of interest page. And at the end of this page, there'll be an online form that you can fill in with a project summary form, which is just brief details about what your project involves and who's going to be working on the project. This gets checked over just to make sure like you're eligible and that's coming from an academic organisation, that the timescales are relevant, and then assuming that's all okay, we send out a more detailed Adzuna proposal form. This asks you in a lot more detail about your proposal. So what we're looking at for in the proposal form is these criteria here. So you'll find sections in the form where you get opportunities to write about each of these things. So for example, privacy and ethics, we'll be looking at does the project require ethical approval? Feasibility, the kind of things we're looking at here, or can the project be completed within the timescales or using the methods that were outlined in the proposal? The scientific contribution, this could be a development of a methodology or development of new data products or resources. It could include publication in an esteemed journal or a presentation at a conference. Potential for public benefit impact. So the panel will be looking at public benefit impact beyond academic research. So the things you could include here are information about planned knowledge exchange or other communications activities. If you have one, you could include a pathways to impact statement, which is where you outline what you would do to make beneficiaries aware of the research so that impact could be achieved. Outcomes. So we respond to all applicants and provide their decision. Successful applicants will be emailed licensing agreements, and we'll share the data on completion of these agreements. As a free service funded by the Economic Social Research Council, we rely on end user feedback to provide evidence of the value of what we do. It's a condition of the licenses that data users inform UBDC of any publications they produce that was a result of having the data. And that researchers also include a citation to acknowledge the data owner, Adzuna and UBDC. So I'll now hand over to Scott Sweden from Adzuna, who will present the next session about the background to Adzuna company and the reasons for the data creation.
Right, you should see my title page. If that you're not, then that is a problem. So thanks very much, Heather. My hope and expectation really is that this is going to prove obviously a very good, great partnership. So thank you to the UBDC. And irrespective, I suppose, of your faculty or your expertise, I'm going to be very excited to learn about the research and, importantly, I suppose, the outcomes of your endeavours in the year to follow. Very briefly, on the head, as it says on the tin here, I'm the head of data sales, which is fairly self-explanatory. But I'm going to be talking to you about who we are. I'm going to assume that none of you have familiarity with the data set. For those that are very familiar with job advert data, just please bear with me and I apologise, or go and make a coffee. I'm going to talk about where the data comes from, some stats of the coverage and what you can expect to extract, what it's used for, and I'm going to end with some real life public sector applications of our data at the moment. So Adzuna, who are we and why are we? So we've only been making our data available really for the last 18 months, which was through essentially organic demand. And it's come from a very diverse group of clients. It's from venture capital, asset management, quant funds to corporate HR. And of course, as you can imagine, those in public policy and labour market economists. Adzuna was founded 10 years ago now. Doug Monroe, Andrew Hunter, ex-eBayers, Gumtree. And their mission was to make it easier for millions of people to find better jobs. And that's by listing every job everywhere, as it says, the slogan goes. We do that by leveraging our proprietary technology and our algos to achieve that goal. So for many of those are in business schools that might find this slightly interesting, our commercial model works by driving click traffic to job boards. So there's an important distinction, and I'll get to that later, but they are our clients and we aggregate all the jobs from them in the marketplace into one particular place. And then through this aggregation model, it means we now have 20 million monthly visitors across the 16 different countries we operate. For the data set you'll hopefully get access to. We treat the UK as one country to us, one market. So that essentially means England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland is where you'll see data. And as I mentioned, we've developed sort of leading matching technology. And we also provide that to central governments. So we won the tender for their Find a Job service. And that's something we manage to this day, and it's a public service that you can see. So what makes us, for a bit of plugging, what makes us the #1 job search engine in the countries we operate? For a start, having more vacancies than any other single provider is obviously going to be very helpful for our cause. And that should be great news for the analysts amongst you, or perhaps the economists amongst you as well. So how do we do this? So we aggregate job adverts and we have 3 primary sources. The first is our job boards. Some of these would be your household names. So you'll be familiar with Reed and Monster, etc. And they will take jobs from their clients who will pay them a fee to list their job. Recruiters, so on the right-hand column, you'll see recruiters, so Michael Page, they'll manage the whole process for a job seeker, so from finding job to application, to negotiating a contract, if they're any good. But they also have now, of course, their own website, so they will host all their jobs, their clients' jobs on there. And then lastly, there's the middle section, which is employers directly. So we call that direct business at Adzuna. So we will have Virgin, for example, come and host their jobs directly because they have access to 2 to 3 million job seekers a month. So the best place to find all the jobs. So they'll want to come to us directly. And just to make sure everyone is still with me, I've thrown a little curveball in there. So Michael Page, as you'll notice, some of you will notice that they could be a client of ours. So they could be those that they are hiring for more recruiters. I don't know if that's a great idea in the world, but I don't think we need more recruiters, but they could be hiring for lots more recruiters as a direct client, but they also we will be taking in their jobs feed across all that they're hosting all their clients' jobs as well. So just to help with the distinction of where our job sources come from. So what does that mean for our job representation, which is probably more interesting to you? So from our database point of view, in the UK on the left-hand side, we've got 85 million jobs plus in our UK historical database. The USA, it's about 240 million and growing. In the Russia, it's a good market for us, it's about half that. In terms of what you'll be able to access, though, the type of data set, more importantly, you'll be accessing, is we have about 1.15 million live jobs on our data set. So you will be getting weekly snapshots. So week to week, what were the live jobs on the marketplace at that point in time? And so what you're actually getting is the same type of access. The presentation of data is the same as the ONS are receiving today. And I'll refer to that at the end. How representative is the sample is another question we get asked a lot. By that, I mean, how reflective of the online job market is it? In the UK, hopefully that you'll get access to, we estimate it's about 95% plus representative of the online job market space. We have similar coverage in other countries like Germany, France, Netherlands, etc. And we know this by simply we can go on our clients' websites, but also we start to make comparisons with national statistic databases in the countries. Obviously, the UK is the ONS. Now, we particularly this comes from my head of data science. He sees it as a high, as we all do, really, a hugely valuable goldmine of data for those that aren't familiar with job advert data. So, it's a rich source. You can look at hiring trends. You can look at, if you're looking at human capital, you can look at salaries. You can look at perks. You can, obviously, as an economist, you can look at labor demand or industry sector growth. If you're doing public policy work, you can look at skills insights, and you can look at changing work patterns. Again, sort of HR, human capital. How are things moving through post-COVID? How are things changing over time? How much has it sped up? And we can cut this by all sorts of other fields, like obviously granular location. We can do it by industry. You can look at it at granular occupational level, and so on and so forth. There's a huge wealth of data, and one client recently said to me, an economist said to me, actually, this data is more like air. I thought that may have been a bit extreme, but maybe the data scientists amongst you will think so too. However, it doesn't come to us all nicely extracted. We've obviously had to do a lot of crunching, just as a bit of fun, really. You can see some adverts in the middle. It's £1 per year. If you want to be a consultant petroleum chemist, I don't advise that. And then if you look at something, for example, this software engineer role, which some of you may be or have become, you can see that they're relating to ballet in the job description. So it's not great, perhaps, if we're an economist. However, of course, these are written by human beings, and we are prone to error and flights of fancy. But from a social researcher perspective, this is a great thing. There's a lot of value because of these type of errors and what people are writing. And I'll show you why next. So if we just go into a bit more detail, the full job description text, which you will be getting, there is a huge amount of data. So whilst we extract, as we like to think at the tip of the iceberg, the job descriptions can extract more than we've already done. So, for example, seniority. So just looking at seniority, questions that are being asked of our data, is the workforce getting older, due to remote working, therefore less succession planning, therefore people are staying in their jobs longer. This could be true of enterprise businesses. And when we look at enterprise businesses, company hiring. So in 2020, we tagged about 8,000 known companies. There are probably a lot more that we haven't tagged to our own database. But you could look at how does this relate to financial reporting. This is a metric that VCs, venture capital firms, are using for due diligence, or it could be asset managers on industry trading. If we look at perks, just looking at perks, researching human capital, remote working. How are companies now enticing the next generation of employees? What are they doing? Qualifications, you could extract all the qualifications requirement. Obviously, there's a big piece here on education. What are the academic credentials for junior roles, for example, for graduate roles? Is that demand now greater than ever? What occupations does this apply to? And my last point on this, there's a text passing area, is the future of work, as inverted commas, huge topic, McKinsey, 800 million jobs at risk from AI and digitization of the economy. Which occupations are most defensible based on hiring and firing rates? What are we seeing out there? Linguistics analysis. So the second part, diversity and inclusion. I've already spoken to academics about this type of work. So for the heavy data scientists, data crunchers amongst you, looking at sentiment analysis, understanding gender and cultural bias in the language is something that's being heavily looked at the moment, of course, because, as we obviously, D&I, it's very topical. And we are, as I say, we are 95% of the online jobs market. So there's a lot to be mined from that. And finally, vector embeddings. So when you're looking at, data scientists amongst you, clustering techniques, we are using that as a company to build recommendation engines for jobs. But of course, there's a lot of other things that you can do with vector embeddings, and and I'll talk about that after as a real world application of our data. So finally, as you just a quick visual representation, you can segment our data and aggregate it up to look at occupations and salaries and vacancy count. You can translate that into interesting, well, we've just used a heat map for this example. There are lots of other ways. And then of course, this happens to be looking at profiling of a particular occupation, and it's an extraction of skills in the workplace. So just to summarize and characterize the things I've said. So it's our opinion that you won't find a more representative sample to work with in the UK. Our data science team has already done a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of cleaning and deduping. And the application set can be applied to many different, from your perspective, I suppose, faculties. So data science and technology, we have a lot of people, lots of universities from technical universities accessing our data, finance and trading, human capital, looking at salaries and perks, to, of course, as the obvious one is labour market and public policy research. There's a huge wealth of applications for our data out there. So finally, I'm just going to end on some public sector applications of our data, and therefore to really help you appreciate the importance of what this data is used for, and obviously the academic research essentially underpins a lot of what goes on out there in the public and the private sector. So you'll know, of course, the ONS, and some of you, the economists amongst you, might know the Labour Workforce Survey that looks at 5,000–6,000 companies. It looks at hiring and firing trends, attitudinal and behavioural characteristics of this as well. What they are doing, if you look at the left-hand side, the ONS are augmenting their surveys, which are quarterly, with our real-time data to build indices on the economic recovery. Now, just a quick stat. Fortunately, we're, as you can see from this data, we're back to, well, just above where we were pre-pandemic levels as average job count, which is good. They are doing a lot more granular stuff privately, internally, but interdepartmentally that they can't publish, but they're doing internally a lot more granular work. More specifically, what are they doing? So some of the things they're doing, they're analysing the relationship between earnings and skills. They're doing location analysis interdepartmentally. They're looking at the impact of COVID on self-employed versus employed. And they're also about to publish a report with our data on the impact of COVID on remote working. So I'll just park the ONS there. On the AI, on the OECD side, on the right-hand side, The OECD, obviously funded by the EU, they represent 27 nations under the EU, I believe, last count. Their AI policy team is looking at the makeup of AI and IT across various occupations. So a data scientist versus a database engineer versus those in research and methodology, and they're looking specifically at what the skills makeup is of those jobs today. And they're looking at how demand differs across regions, which you could do with our data, but of course they also are covering countries, the various other countries that we use. So, and finally, something that's not on here, we have a think tank that is looking more broadly at skills mismatches across professions. Where's there the biggest imbalance? They're mapping vacancy data to sort of ONS data, things like to furloughs and unemployment. And they're also looking at things like economic shocks. So of course we've had a business, some say a business cycle in 12 months that would normally take 5 years or 10 years. So they're looking at using this as an example of an economic shock and seeing how that extrapolates and compares, etc., historically with other data sets out there. So I've gone through an awful lot quite quickly. I appreciate that. However, hopefully the point of this is to give you real food for thought and just get the juices flowing as to all the different applications and where this might sit within your field of expertise, and all sorts of interesting research and objectives that you can think about in order to obtain our data. And as I said at the beginning, I look forward to seeing the research and the outcomes of that research as well. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much for that presentation. It was really interesting. We'll take questions at the end. So I'll hand over to our third speaker, Chunshan Zhao, who will tell us how he plans to use the Adzuna data.
Okay, share my screen. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
All right, thank you. Okay, yeah, thank you, Heather, for the introduction. Yeah, so as she said, my name is Chunshan Zhao, and I'm a lecturer in urban analytics and based in the Urban Big Data Center and Urban Studies in the University of Glasgow. And today, what I want to present is one of the collaborative efforts by thinking of using this new acquisition of the Adzuna dataset, right? And to actually looking at the understanding the impact of AI and smart technologies on jobs using online job vacancy data. So this is a collaborative effort with my colleagues from Leeds, and her name is Jiaqi Ge. Okay, so just to give you some of the background today, first thing is that everybody probably aware that more and more robotics, AI actually starting to substitute the regular tedious human job. And from the current understanding from ONS, it's basically, I mean, not only from ONS, but just like if you look at the general job landscape, right now we have 140 million full-time workers worldwide. And it's about 1.5 million jobs in the UK. But when you're talking about AIs, on the right-hand side, the figures actually saying that after you have these old robotics technologies, you have the AIs, you have the automations, you can only create about 20% of the previous jobs, and remaining 80% will be replaced by those kind of machines. And among those 80%, I would say women, young people, and part-time workers and low-income groups are more likely to lose their job to AI. So in this case, to understand what jobs really, what is really job replacement by AI and what is actually the job creation by AI is very important. And from the current literature review, most of the research focusing on AI and job replacement. And there's a famous paper, 2017, Frey and Osborne, and it's talking about the likelihood of automation of different jobs based on 3 job characteristics. And they have this kind of, categorization, basically say, if you have a job which is have a high social intelligence, full of creativities, it's really need a lot of perception and manipulations. That's something will not easily be replaced by AI. But there's a criticisms around their classification, which is says that because they really based on occupations rather than job task. But actually AI is really replacing the job task rather than really talking about what kind of occupations you really work on. And there's a field of the research recently extend the free and open research by like OECD or ONS in the UK. But what makes us as a team more interested is about the AI and the job creation. So it's really very limited research looking at the job creation of AI. And also because of lack of data. So right now, I mean, before this kind of online job listing times, that it's actually difficult. You only get use survey to get those kind of job information. You don't really get this kind of real-time, large volume data set. So in the current literature, Fieldwork have attempted to classify and quantify job creation by AI using the empirical data. So the lack of understanding will certainly lead us to some of the not comprehensive picture of the job market. And I think a few things we identify. The first thing is that the overestimate the overall net job loss due to AI. So actually how many jobs will actually lose because of the AI or say automation. But from the other side, we may also underestimate the negative impact of job loss to AI on some groups of people and regions in the UK, or maybe you say in a more global context. So this is something trigger us to think of using the new Azuna dataset to look at this research kind of question. And for our project, I mean, our project is still under review, so we put together a proposal. So today I will not really go into those kind of details, but I want to share with you some of our initial ideas. I mean, the project ends, we really want to using, like say, the natural language processing, or say some of the machine learning, deep learning methods to classify and quantify jobs created in the AI sector first. So we have a relatively long-term data set, I mean, including Azuna, including some other data sources I will talk about later. And we are trying to, because we all have, my collaborators and myself all have the geography backgrounds. So we're really interested in like the spatial temporal patterns of the job, I mean, the location and how the impact of the AI on job polarization and also the industrial agglomeration. Okay, so in terms of the right now, it's certainly we are still in the COVID-19 period of time. We're probably in the middle of, I mean, it's in the start of the recovery, and we are, if you look at the economic change to look at a long-term influence, really we don't really know. But using this like Azuna data sets, real time, quickly response, quickly collected data set, is really help us to understand the impact of COVID-19 on AI related jobs using near real time online job advertisement data set. So yeah, as I mentioned, the data set, so the Azuna database obtained by UBDC from 2017 to 2022. And we also got a Burning Glass data set for previous 5 years. And there's also like ONS AI job replacement data set, which is official statistics data we can use. By combining those data sets, we can roughly look at the past 10 years and see what we really can find out in terms of the AI's influence to the different jobs in the UK. So by not talking about methods, but I want to talk about some of the impacts we want to generate from this project. I think the first thing I want to say is that we really want to provide more data science focused and critical new evidence to inform UK government policies to maximize the job creation by AI, which is kind of the next level of the jobs. I mean, that certainly creates more, I would say it's certainly high-tech jobs, and you can attract more, like say, top talents to UK, I would say that. And it's really important to maintain the UK's leadership in AI and innovation, something like the Alan Turing Institute we all know about. And the second thing is that we really want to understand inequality, right? So will actually the COVID-19 actually exacerbate the inequality in the UK. So if we are talking about identify and support those neighborhoods, after we find out if they are hit heavily by COVID, and how to help those regions kind of recovery from this kind of global pandemic. That's something we can find out from this kind of job analyzing and also the spatial temporal analysis. The final thing is that we want to really talking with the policymakers, local authorities to help level up developments in the AI industry across regions in the UK. So potential project ideas, I mean, as we do this kind of webinar, we have the opportunities to share this data set for non-commercial academic research, right? So the potential project ideas, I think this is certainly the Arjuna data will be a truly useful data set for analyzing the labor market, which is the direct understanding from the data set. And also in terms of economic geography, that's a really valuable data set, I would say that. And I mean, for the COVID-19 recovery and renewal, that's also important data set if you can kind of couple with the urban mobility data set and with a few other like more official statistic data set. I mean, as I mentioned in my previous slides, the inequality is something certainly can be looked at through this job listing data set, because we really, if an area is actually you keep seeing the jobs number keeps going down, and that will probably reflect something you really want to be careful about, really to think about how to really help a region grow again. So there can be many other things you can do, especially when you have different academic backgrounds, and also when you have different data sets, you can couple this kind of new forms of data together. So we certainly really welcome your ideas, and we're looking forward to see your proposals of how you want to use this data set. So that's pretty much for today. For my quick kind of the research proposal overview, and happy to take any questions at the end of the presentation. Thank you so much.